The stars above Varin were cold and distant, their light offering no warmth to the dying world below. The planet had once been a beacon of progress, a jewel in the galactic community, a home to the Xilari, a peaceful and intelligent species known for their deep understanding of science and philosophy. But now, Varin was little more than a graveyard. A series of catastrophic solar flares had struck the planet over the past decade, slowly burning away its protective atmosphere. The Xilari had tried everything. Their scientists built massive shields to block the deadly radiation, but the shields failed one by one. Their engineers designed underground cities, but the resources to sustain them ran out too quickly. Their leaders sent distress signals to the galaxy, pleading for help. No one came. The Galactic Council, the ruling body of many advanced civilizations, debated the crisis. But in the end, they decided that saving the Xilari was a waste of time and resources. The planet is too damaged, they said. The Xilari are too weak to survive. It is not our problem. One by one, their allies turned away. Even those who had once called the Xilari their friends chose to remain silent. The great empires of the galaxy, with their massive fleets and advanced technology, ignored their suffering. Now only a few thousand Xilari remained, scattered across the dying cities of Varin. Food was running out. The air was becoming toxic. Every day, more and more of them collapsed from starvation or sickness. Yet, despite everything, a small group of Xilari scientists refused to give up. They gathered in a ruined laboratory, their once proud minds now desperate and weary. Dr. Velith, one of the last great minds of their species, stood before a flickering console, his fingers trembling as he prepared to send one final distress signal. "This is foolish," said Saren, another scientist. "No one will come. No one cares." "We cannot know that," Velith replied, his voice hoarse. "As long as there is a chance, we must try." Saren sighed, shaking his head. "Even if someone hears us, who would help us? The strongest empires have already decided our fate. What hope is left?" Velith turned to face his old friend. "Hope does not come from power," he said. "Hope comes from those who refuse to turn away. Someone out there must be listening." With that, he pressed the transmit button. A message echoed into deep space, a final cry for help, sent across the endless void. It was simple, desperate, and filled with sorrow. "We are the last of the Xilari. Our home is dying. We have no ships, no weapons, no resources. The galaxy has turned its back on us. We beg, if anyone can hear us, please, help us." Then there was nothing left to do but wait. Days passed. The skies above Varin remained silent. No ships arrived. No messages came. The Xilari continued to fade, their last embers of life flickering in the cold wind. Velith sat alone in the ruined city, staring up at the sky. Had Saren been right? Was this truly the end? And then, a miracle happened. Far beyond the dying planet, in the distant reaches of space, a small human exploratory fleet was scanning the cosmos for new discoveries. The Pathfinder, a long-range human starship, drifted quietly through the void, searching for habitable worlds. Its crew of explorers and scientists had little interest in politics or war. They were dreamers, wanderers, people who believed that space was meant to be explored, not conquered. Commander Elena Carter, the leader of the mission, sat in the control room, sipping a cup of coffee when the signal came through. It was weak, broken, nearly lost in the cosmic noise. But the words were clear enough. She listened. Then she listened again. "Captain," said Lieutenant Davis, her communications officer, "this message, it's coming from a planet called Varin. According to our database, the Xilari live there." He paused, frowning. "Or used to." Carter set her cup down. "What do you mean?" Davis hesitated. Varin was declared a lost cause by the Galactic Council. No one was supposed to help them. Silence filled the control room. The crew exchanged uneasy glances. They all knew what this meant. If they responded, they would be breaking intergalactic law. Carter closed her eyes for a moment, then exhaled. She wasn't a politician. She wasn't a war leader. She was an explorer, and she knew one thing. No species should be left to die when help was possible. She stood up, her voice firm. Set a course for Varin. Davis hesitated. Are you sure? If the council finds out. I don't care, Carter interrupted. They asked for help, and we're the only ones listening. The engines of the HFY Pathfinder roared to life, and the small fleet turned toward the Forsaken Planet. For the first time in years, hope was on its way to Varin. The vast emptiness of space stretched before the HFY Pathfinder, its engines glowing softly as it traveled through the dark. Inside the ship, the crew worked tirelessly, preparing for the unknown. Commander Elena Carter stood on the bridge, staring at the holographic display of Varin, a planet on the brink of death. The distress signal had been weak, but its meaning was clear. The Xilari were still alive, and they needed help. Captain, said Lieutenant Davis, his fingers dancing across the console, we're approaching the planet's orbit. Scanners show a heavily damaged atmosphere, extreme radiation levels, and failing energy sources. It's worse than we thought. Carter folded her arms. She had read the reports before, but seeing the data firsthand made it real. Any signs of life? She asked. Davis hesitated before answering. Yes, a few thousand life signatures, scattered, weak. If we don't act fast, there won't be anyone left to save. A heavy silence filled the bridge. The Galactic Council had abandoned the Xilari, labeling them a lost cause. The strongest empires had refused to help. Yet here they were, just a small human fleet, far from home, preparing to do the impossible. Because someone had to. Send a message, Carter ordered. Let them know we're here. Davis nodded, opening a transmission. This is the UHS Pathfinder of the United Human Systems. We received your distress signal and are ready to assist. Please respond. The crew waited. Seconds passed, then minutes. The static of deep space filled their ears. Had they come too late? Then, a broken voice crackled through the speakers. This is Dr. Veleth, of the Xilari. I can't believe someone answered. Carter's heart pounded. They had made it in time. We hear you, Dr. Veleth, she said, her voice steady. We're here to help. A deep sigh of relief came from the other end. You don't know how long we've waited, how much we've lost. The others, they all turned away. Carter clenched her fists. Well, we won't. The desperate planet. The UHS Pathfinder and its escort ships descended into Varin's atmosphere, battling against the planet's brutal conditions. The skies were filled with thick, swirling clouds of dust. The cities below were nothing but shattered ruins, once golden towers now crumbling under the weight of time and neglect. As the ships landed in the largest surviving settlement, the crew saw the Xilari for the first time. They were tall, slender beings, their once lustrous silver skin now dull and weakened. Their glowing blue eyes, which had once held wisdom and knowledge, now reflected only exhaustion and hunger. Dr. Veleth, the scientist who had sent the distress call, stepped forward, supported by another Xilari. He looked at the humans with both disbelief and hope. You truly came, he whispered. Carter stepped down from the ramp, offering her hand. Of course we did. Veleth hesitated for a moment before grasping her hand. It was the first time in years that the Xilari had been touched by kindness. A race against time. The Pathfinder's medical team immediately got to work, treating the sick and malnourished. Engineers deployed portable atmospheric shields, trying to push back the radiation. Supplies were unloaded. Food, water, medicine, things the Xilari hadn't seen in years. But the situation was worse than they had expected. There's not enough power left in their infrastructure, reported Lieutenant Ramirez, the chief engineer. We can stabilize small areas, but without a proper energy source, The planet will continue to collapse. Carter exhaled sharply. Then we find a way. The Xelari watched in amazement as the humans worked, tireless, determined, refusing to surrender to hopelessness. Saren, the skeptical scientist, finally approached Carter. "Why are you doing this?" he asked, his voice filled with suspicion. "What do you gain?" Carter gave him a small smile. "Nothing." She looked at the suffering Xelari. "But it's not about gain. It's about what's right." Saren fell silent. The rest of the galaxy had abandoned them because they saw no profit in saving the dying race. But these humans, they were different. The warning from the stars. Just as the first relief efforts were underway, an urgent message came from the Pathfinder scanners. "Commander," Davis called out, "we have incoming ships." Carter's expression hardened. "Who?" Davis studied the readings. "It's a Galactic Council blockade. They're sending a message." A transmission came through, and a cold, bureaucratic voice filled the air. "This is the Galactic Council. You are interfering with a declared non-intervention zone. Cease your activities and leave Varin immediately." Carter's crew exchanged uneasy glances. They knew this would happen. The Council didn't like when people ignored their rulings. Dr. Veleth looked at Carter, fear in his tired eyes. "They're going to force you to leave, aren't they?" Carter narrowed her eyes, her voice steady and calm. "No, they're going to try." The message repeated, "This is your final warning. Leave now or face consequences." Carter didn't flinch. Instead, she turned to her crew and issued the most important command of her life. "Get back to work." The Pathfinder's engines hummed. The medical teams continued their aid. The engineers kept repairing the atmosphere stabilizers. The Galactic Council may have turned its back on the Xelari, but humanity would not. And if the Council wanted to stop them, they'd have to do more than send warnings. The message from the Galactic Council echoed through the command center of the UH Pathfinder. The words were clear: "Leave Varin immediately or face consequences." But Commander Elena Carter wasn't leaving. She stood on the bridge, staring at the holographic display of the incoming Council blockade fleet. 3 large warships were moving into position, their weapons offline. For now. They weren't here to attack yet. They were here to intimidate. The Pathfinder was a research vessel. It wasn't built for battle. The 2 escort ships accompanying it had some defenses, but against a Council fleet, they wouldn't last long. Even so, Carter wasn't about to abandon the Xelari. She turned to Lieutenant Davis, who was monitoring communications. "Are they still waiting for a response?" Davis nodded. "Yes, Captain. They expect us to stand down." Carter exhaled, then tapped the console. "Open a channel." A moment later, the holo image of a stern-looking alien appeared. High Officer Relfar, a representative of the Galactic Council. His reptilian eyes studied Carter with a cold expression. "Commander Carter," he said, his voice smooth but firm, "you are violating intergalactic law. This planet has been declared a non-intervention zone." Carter folded her arms. "A non-intervention zone. That's just a fancy way of saying, we don't care if they die." Relfar didn't flinch. The Xelari's fate was decided by the Council. Their civilization was deemed unsustainable. Carter's jaw clenched. "By whose standards?" "Yours?" She took a step forward. "We received their distress signal. They are not extinct. They are not beyond saving. And yet, the entire Council decided to do nothing." Relfar's expression remained unreadable. The decision was made based on available resources and political stability. Assisting them would disrupt. Carter cut him off. "Disrupt what?" "Your perfectly organized neglect." Silence. Behind Carter, her crew watched with quiet admiration. She wasn't just standing up for the Xelari. She was standing against the entire system that abandoned them. Relfar exhaled, looking mildly annoyed. "Commander, I am giving you one last chance. Pack up your supplies, leave Varin, and this mistake will be forgotten." Carter's response was immediate. No. Relthar's reptilian eyes narrowed. Then you leave us no choice. The transmission cut off. A warning siren blared through the Pathfinder. Davis's voice was urgent. Captain, the Council ships are charging their disruption beams. They're preparing to disable our systems. Carter stayed calm. How long until they fire? 30 seconds. She turned to Lieutenant Ramirez, the chief engineer. Can we block it? Ramirez shook his head. Not with our shields. If they hit us, we'll lose power, and we'll be forced to leave. Carter's mind raced. The Council wasn't going to destroy them outright. That would cause too much controversy. Instead, they would use non-lethal force to force them out. But there had to be a way around this. Her eyes landed on Dr. Veleth, the Silari scientist, who had been silently observing. Dr. Veleth, she said, the old planetary defense grid. Does any of it still work? Veleth blinked, surprised. The defense grid. It hasn't been used in decades. The system is in ruins. But is it functional? Veleth hesitated, then nodded. Some parts might still work, but we don't have weapons strong enough to fight them. I don't need weapons, Carter said. I need a distraction. A desperate gamble. While the Council ships prepared to fire, Carter and her team rushed into action. Ramirez and Veleth worked side by side, hacking into the Silari planetary grid, searching for anything they could use. Meanwhile, Carter ordered the Pathfinder's engines to maximum power, preparing for evasive action. The countdown ticked lower. 10 seconds. Ramirez's voice crackled through the comms. Captain, we found an old ion pulse relay. It won't cause damage, but it can send out a huge electromagnetic burst. It might blind their sensors for a few seconds. Carter's eyes lit up. Do it. Veleth activated the system. A deep hum resonated through the ruins of Varin, and suddenly, a massive pulse of energy shot out from the remains of the old planetary network. The Council warships immediately faltered. Their targeting systems glitched, their sensors scrambled by the unexpected interference. That was the moment Carter had been waiting for. Now, get our people to cover and activate the atmospheric shields. As the Council ships struggled to recover, the human teams on the surface worked faster than ever, rushing supplies into the underground shelters, setting up medical stations, and finalizing repairs on the Siluri's oxygen generators. Every second counted. By the time the Council fleet restored their systems, the humans had already fortified their position. The Siluri were no longer helpless. Defiance and hope. A new transmission came through. Relthar again. This time, he didn't look calm. He looked frustrated. Commander Carter, he said, his voice sharper than before, you are interfering with an official Council order. If you continue this course of action, you will face serious consequences. Carter didn't even hesitate. You don't scare me, Relthar. He narrowed his eyes. Then what will it take for you to back down? Carter smiled. Nothing. Because unlike the Council, we don't abandon those who need us. Relthar's face darkened. Then you've made your choice. The transmission ended. Davis turned to Carter. Captain, they'll be back. I know, she said. But now so will we. As the stars shimmered above Varin, the humans and the Siluri stood together, no longer as strangers, but as allies. For the first time in years, the Siluri had hope. And humanity had just sent a message to the galaxy. We don't turn our backs on the forgotten. The air on Varin was heavy with dust, but for the first time in decades, there was hope. The UH Pathfinder and its crew had defied the Galactic Council and chosen to stay. The humans worked tirelessly alongside the Siluri, repairing what little remained of their once great civilization. Commander Elena Carter stood near a makeshift command post, watching as engineers, doctors, and soldiers moved with purpose. How are we looking? She asked, turning to Lieutenant Ramirez. Ramirez wiped sweat from his forehead and checked his datapad. We've stabilized 3 zones, but power is still an issue. Without a permanent energy source, These fixes won't last. Carter frowned. They were keeping the Xilari alive, but survival wasn't enough. They needed a future. Dr. Velith, the Xilari scientist, approached. Our people haven't seen this much activity in years, he said, his voice filled with emotion. We thought we were forgotten. Carter gave him a reassuring nod. Not anymore. Just then, Lieutenant Davis called out from the comm station. Captain, we've got incoming transmissions. Not just one, multiple. Carter's heart skipped a beat. From who? Davis glanced at the screen. His eyes widened. It's independent factions, traders, scientists, small colonies. They're offering support. Carter's eyes widened. Put it through. The first message came from a human colony on the outskirts of the Soren Belt. We heard what you did, a rough voice said. You stood against the council and helped those they abandoned. We want in. We can send medical supplies and food. Another message followed, this one from a Taurian trader, a feline-like species known for their neutrality. The council thinks they own the galaxy. The trader purred. But they don't speak for all of us. I have spare generators and purification units. They're yours. More messages poured in. Not everyone in the galaxy agreed with the council. The story of humanity's defiance had spread, and now, others were choosing to stand with them. Carter felt a surge of determination. This wasn't just about Varin anymore. This was about proving that kindness and courage still mattered in a galaxy ruled by indifference. A desperate council. Meanwhile, aboard the Galactic Council's flagship, High Officer Relthar was furious. More ships are arriving. He barked at his aide. Yes, sir. Non-military vessels, traders, independent colonies, even rogue scientists. They're ignoring the Council's non-intervention order. Relthar gritted his teeth. The Council had expected the humans to break the rules, but they hadn't expected others to follow their lead. This cannot continue, he growled. If we allow this, the entire structure of the Council will be questioned. More abandoned worlds will demand aid. The balance will collapse. His aide hesitated. Shall we? Escalate. Relthar's eyes darkened. Not yet. We will remind them who truly holds power. He sent a transmission to the UA's Pathfinder. A threat from the stars. Carter stood on the bridge as the Council's symbol flickered on the holographic display. Relthar's cold, reptilian face appeared. You have gone too far, he said, his voice laced with barely contained anger. You were warned, yet you refused to leave. Now you spread your rebellion beyond this planet. You think you are noble, but all you are doing is disturbing the peace. Carter raised an eyebrow. You call abandoning an entire species peace. Relthar ignored her. Your actions will have consequences. The Council will not tolerate this disruption. If you do not cease all operations immediately, you will not like what happens next. The message ended. A heavy silence filled the room. The threat was clear. Davis swallowed. Captain, do you think they'll attack? Carter's expression hardened. Not yet. The Council relies on fear, but they don't want a war. Not when the galaxy is watching. She turned to Ramirez. How soon can we boost our defenses? Ramirez hesitated. We're doing what we can, but we don't have warships. If they send a full fleet. Carter nodded. She knew the risks. They were holding the line, but for how long? Then, a new signal came through. Captain, Davis said, looking confused. This one's different. It's encrypted. Carter frowned. Who is it from? Davis hesitated. They're not saying, but they claim to have a solution to our energy problem. Carter exchanged a glance with Velith. The Xilari scientist stepped forward. If they truly have an energy source, it could change everything. Carter took a deep breath. Open the channel. The screen flickered, and a hooded figure appeared. Their voice was distorted, their identity hidden. I know you seek to save Varin, the figure said. And I know the Council wants you gone. But what if I told you there was a way to restore the planet for good? Carter narrowed her eyes. Who are you? The figure ignored the question. A long time ago, the Xilari developed something powerful, a prototype energy core capable of restoring dying worlds. The council feared it, so they buried it. Velith gasped. That's a myth. It was never proven to exist. The figure chuckled. It exists, and I can tell you where to find it. Carter leaned forward. What's the catch? The figure's voice turned serious. The core is hidden deep in Varen's underground ruins, but the council knows it too. If you go looking for it, they will try to stop you. Carter's mind raced. This could be the key to saving the Xilari for good. But it also meant pushing the council even further. She glanced at Velith. His blue eyes were filled with both hope and fear. We have to try, he whispered. Carter turned back to the screen. Her decision was already made. Tell us where to find it. The figure nodded. Sending coordinates now. But hurry. The council won't wait forever. The transmission ended. Carter looked at her crew. We have a chance to end this fight. Not just survive, but win. She straightened her shoulders. Prepare a team. We're going underground. As the ship's engines hummed in the background, the battle for Varen had just entered its most dangerous stage. The underground ruins of Varen stretched out before them, dark, ancient, and untouched for centuries. Dust hung in the air, disturbed only by the flickering lights of the Pathfinder's expedition team as they carefully navigated the crumbling tunnels. Commander Elena Carter led the way, her pulse steady but her mind sharp. She had faced danger before, but this was different. They weren't just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting for a future. Beside her, Dr. Velith moved cautiously, scanning the walls with a small device. This technology. It's older than I expected, he murmured. If the energy core is real, it must be buried deep. Behind them, Lieutenant Ramirez, Surgeon Hale, and a few other soldiers carried equipment, ready for anything. They all knew the risks. The council wouldn't sit back and let them succeed. Carter turned to Lieutenant Davis, who was monitoring communications. Any word from the surface? Davis's voice crackled over the radio. So far, no movement from the council's fleet. But I don't like this, Captain. It's too quiet. Carter nodded. She didn't like it either. The hidden gateway. After hours of careful exploration, they reached a massive stone door, covered in strange markings. The writing was ancient Xilari, barely readable even to Velith. This is it, Velith said, his voice filled with awe. This must lead to the core. Ramirez ran a hand over the surface. How do we open it? Velith examined the carvings, his mind racing. Then he pointed to a series of symbols on the side. These represent energy pathways. I think it needs a power source to activate. Carter turned to Ramirez. Can we power it up? Ramirez nodded. If we can reroute some energy from our equipment, it might work. Working quickly, Ramirez connected a portable power cell to the wall circuits. Sparks flickered, and suddenly, the stone door trembled. With a deep, ancient rumble, the massive entrance slid open, revealing the dark chamber beyond. The team exchanged glances. There was no turning back now. Carter took a deep breath. Move in. Stay alert. The core of hope. Inside, the chamber was vast, larger than anything they had expected. At its center, resting on an elevated platform, was a glowing structure, pulsing with a soft blue light. The energy core, Velith whispered in disbelief. It's real. The device was massive, shaped like an orb, with intricate metalwork and faint symbols running across its surface. It didn't look like a weapon. It looked like a heart, beating with power. Ramirez scanned it. It's still functional, but it's in standby mode. We'll need time to reactivate it. Carter nodded. Then let's get to work. The team moved quickly, setting up equipment to analyze and restore the core. But before they could begin, a warning blared through their comms. Captain, Davis's voice was urgent. Council forces are landing. They must have tracked us. Carter's heart pounded. They had to move fast. She turned to Ramirez. "How long until we can activate it?" Ramirez grimaced. 15 minutes. Maybe less. Carter gritted her teeth. "That's more time than they'll give us." She turned to Hale and the soldiers. "We hold the line. The council strikes." Outside the ruins, council troops moved swiftly, their weapons drawn. These weren't ordinary patrol units. These were elite enforcers, sent to end this rebellion before it could spread. High Officer Relthar watched from his command ship, his gaze cold. Crush them. The humans must not leave with the core. A battle below the surface. Blaster fire echoed through the tunnels as Carter's team took defensive positions. The council troops moved with precision, forcing the humans to fight while Ramirez and Velith worked on the core. Hale's voice rang through the comms. "We're outnumbered, Captain." Carter fired back, taking cover behind a fallen column. "Hold them off. Just a little longer." At the center of the room, Velith was frantic. "The core is waking up, but it's unstable. We need to guide the energy output." Ramirez worked furiously, his fingers dancing over the controls. Almost there. Suddenly, a massive shockwave burst from the core, knocking everyone off their feet. The room shook. Velith gasped. "It's activating." A low hum filled the air, and the soft blue glow of the core grew brighter. The energy radiated outward, spreading through the ruins, through the tunnels, through the planet itself. And then, for the first time in centuries, Varen's sky began to change. Hope awakens. Outside, the Silari villagers looked up as the gray, polluted clouds above them began to break apart. For the first time in generations, sunlight touched the surface of Varen. The dying world was healing. Back underground, the council forces hesitated. They saw what was happening. They felt it. This was no mere human rebellion. This was a miracle. Relthar watched from orbit, his expression dark. This was not supposed to happen. Carter, breathing heavily, grinned as she watched the core pulse with life. She turned to her crew. "We did it." But they weren't safe yet. The council would not let this stand. The battle for Varen was far from over. For the first time in centuries, Varen was changing. The dark clouds that had choked the sky for generations began to part, revealing streaks of golden sunlight. The once dead soil shifted, as if awakening from a long slumber. The Silari people stood in stunned silence, watching the sky with wide eyes. Hope, something they had long forgotten, now burned brightly in their hearts. But even as the planet began to heal, danger was closing in. A desperate escape. Deep in the underground chamber, Commander Carter and her team were still catching their breath. The ancient core pulsed with energy, sending shockwaves of renewal across the planet. Lieutenant Ramirez checked his scanner. "The core is stabilizing." "It's really working, Captain." Dr. Velith wiped his eyes, unable to hide his emotions. "I never thought I would live to see this." Carter smiled, but her relief was short-lived. A sudden explosion shook the ruins. The walls trembled, dust and debris falling from above. Lieutenant Davis's voice crackled over the comms. "Captain, council forces are advancing. They're hitting the ruins with heavy fire." Carter's grip tightened on her weapon. "We can't fight them all. We need to get out of here." Ramirez pointed toward a side tunnel. "That passage should lead back to the surface. If we move now, we can still escape." Carter nodded. "Everyone, fall back." The team moved quickly, but the council troops were right behind them. Laser fire lit up the tunnels, forcing the humans and Silari to take cover. Sergeant Hale returned fire. "We won't hold them off for long." A council officer's voice echoed through the ruins. "You cannot escape. Surrender now, and we will show mercy." Carter gritted her teeth. She knew better. The council had no mercy. "We keep moving," she ordered. "No one gets left behind." The Xilari rise. On the surface, the Xilari people saw the battle unfolding. They had spent years in fear, hiding from the galaxy that had abandoned them. But today was different. Today, they saw humans fighting for them, risking their lives for a world that was not their own. And something changed. A auxiliary elder, Jenna, stepped forward. For years, we thought we were alone, that no one cared. She looked at her people. But these humans have stood by us. They have given us back our sky, our land. She raised a staff and pointed toward the battle. We will not hide any longer. The auxiliary villagers, once weak and scattered, now rallied together. They took up whatever tools, weapons, or equipment they could find and rushed to aid their saviors. The council had expected no resistance, but they had underestimated the spirit of a people reborn. Betrayal and confrontation. Aboard the council's flagship, High Officer Relfar watched the situation unfold, his claws digging into the armrest of his chair. "This is unacceptable," he growled. "This planet should have been forgotten." An aide hesitated. "Sir, the energy core is stabilizing. If this continues, Varin will become a thriving world again." Relthar's eyes narrowed. "And if that happens, the Council's authority will be questioned." He turned to his fleet commander. "Prepare an orbital strike. If we cannot stop them below, we will erase them from above." The bridge officers froze. "Sir," one of them hesitated. "That would mean destroying the auxiliary people, and our own forces still on the surface." Relthar's voice was cold. They knew the risks. But before the command could be given, a new voice echoed through the bridge. "I think that's enough, High Officer." Relfar turned sharply. A figure stepped forward from the shadows. A council delegate, one of the few members with higher authority than Relfar himself. The delegate's eyes were calm, but there was a dangerous edge to their voice. "If you destroy this planet, the truth will spread. The galaxy will know that the council abandoned an entire species." Relfar clenched his fists. "We cannot let this rebellion continue." The delegate stared at the screen, watching the auxiliary and humans fighting together. "This isn't a rebellion," they said. "This is hope. And hope is something the council cannot afford to be seen destroying." Silence filled the room. Then, slowly, the delegate turned to Relfar. "Stand down." Relfar's jaw tightened. He knew he had no choice. The order was given. The attack was called off. A new dawn. On the surface, the battle suddenly stopped. The council troops received the retreat order, and without hesitation, they pulled back. Carter and her team watched in shock as the enemy forces withdrew, vanishing into the sky. The auxiliary cheered. Ramirez frowned. What just happened? Velith exhaled. The council chose to walk away. Carter's shoulders relaxed, but she didn't let down her guard. They didn't do this out of kindness. They did it because they had no choice. She turned to Velith. "Your people have their planet back, but the council won't forget this." Velith nodded, his expression serious. "Then we must make sure we are ready for whatever comes next." As the first rays of sunlight touched the ruins, Carter allowed herself a small smile. Varin had been saved. But the fight for true freedom had only just begun. The council ships disappeared into the sky, leaving behind a world that had once been forgotten. Varin was free. The air felt lighter, the sky brighter, and for the first time in centuries, hope filled the hearts of the auxiliary people. Commander Elena Carter stood at the edge of the ancient ruins, watching as the last council warship vanished into the atmosphere. She still couldn't believe it. The enemy had retreated. Beside her, Dr. Velith took a deep breath, his eyes scanning the landscape. The once dead land was changing before their eyes. Flowers were beginning to bloom, and the air carried a fresh, clean scent. "This is incredible," Velith whispered. "Our world is healing." Lieutenant Ramirez grinned as he nudged Sergeant Hale. "Did we really just scare off the most powerful force in the galaxy?" Hale chuckled. "I think they were more afraid of the truth getting out." Carter smirked but kept her voice steady. "Don't celebrate too soon. The council left because they had no choice, but they won't forget this. Velith nodded. Then we must be ready. The celebration of a people reborn. As the sun set, the Xelari gathered in the heart of their village, lighting torches and preparing a feast. It was a night of celebration, of freedom, of hope, of survival. For years, they had lived in fear, believing they were alone in the universe. But now, they had seen the truth. They were not forgotten. Carter and her crew sat among the Xelari, sharing stories and laughter. Children ran between them, playing and laughing, a sound that had once been rare in this place. Elder Jenna, the leader of the village, stood and raised her voice. For too long, we believed that no one cared for us. We thought the galaxy had abandoned us. She turned to Carter, her eyes filled with gratitude. But then the humans came. They fought for us, bled for us, and because of them, we stand here today, not as the lost, but as the reborn. The Xelari cheered, their voices echoing across the land. Carter felt a warmth in her chest. She had led many missions, but this one felt different. This wasn't just about survival, it was about something greater. Ramirez leaned in. Captain, this is the first time I've seen an alien species throw a party for us. Carter chuckled. Let's enjoy it. We don't know what tomorrow will bring. A warning from the stars. As the night went on, Carter stepped away from the celebration, staring up at the star-filled sky. She knew the council would not stay silent forever. They had left because of political pressure, but they still saw the Xelari as a loose end. Footsteps approached. It was Velith. You are troubled, he said. Carter nodded. This victory won't last if we don't prepare. Velith sighed. I know. The council may not attack today or tomorrow, but they will return. Carter looked at him. Then we have to make sure that when they do, Varin is ready. Velith's gaze was firm. We will not be helpless again. A plan for the future. The next morning, Carter gathered her team and the Xelari leaders. The celebration was over. Now, it was time to plan. The council is powerful, she began. We cannot fight them in open war, but we don't have to. She looked at the Xelari. Your people have survived in the shadows for centuries. You know this land better than anyone. If we train you, if we build defenses, you can become strong enough to protect yourselves. Elder Jenna nodded. And you? Will you stay? Carter hesitated. I don't know how long we can remain without drawing attention, but we won't abandon you. Velith placed a hand on her shoulder. Then let us begin. Together. A signal to the galaxy. As the humans and Xelari worked together, Carter sent a secret transmission into the stars. It was a message of truth. It told of a world that had been left to die, and of a people who refused to be forgotten. It told of a corrupt council that abandoned an entire species, and the humans who helped them rise again. The message spread far and wide, reaching those who questioned the council's rule. And across the galaxy, in hidden places, a rebellion began to stir. A new era begins. Varin was no longer a dead world. It was alive. The Xelari were no longer victims. They were warriors, survivors, and dreamers. And humanity. They were no longer just explorers. They were saviors. Carter stood at the edge of the village, watching as the first Xelari warriors trained under her crew's guidance. She smiled. This was only the beginning. The galaxy would never be the same again.